Welcome to the Naturally Healthy Pets podcast. Let's get to it.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Judy Morgan. I'm your host for Dr. Judy Morgan's Naturally Healthy Pets podcast. My guest today is one of my favorite equine people in the whole world because she's brilliant, and I wish I could just sneak inside of her head for a little while and get all that information, because I'm a horse girl and I've been a horse girl for most of my life. And unfortunately, I have not put as much focus on nutrition and care of my equines as I do for my small animals. And thanks to Dr. Joyce Harman, I actually now pay a lot more attention to what is going into my equines, just like I do with my dogs and cats. So Dr. Joyce Harman, if you have not heard of her, she has been in holistic practice for 34 years using acupuncture, chiropractic, herbal medicine, and homeopathy to enhance performance and help those with a variety of chronic conditions. She is an authority on Lyme disease and insulin resistance and natural nutrition. She has written over 100 papers, textbook chapters, and articles for horse publications. Her publications include the Pain-Free Back and Saddle Fit books, which are excellent. I've had them since they first came out, before I knew Joyce personally. Excellent books if you have horses and you're riding and you are concerned about saddle fit or back pain, which almost all horses suffer with. Highly recommend getting those books. And she has created the only complete natural nutrition online course for horses written by a holistic veterinarian. And that course is available on Dr. Judy U. It is amazing. Even if you've been a horse person for a long time like me, you can learn a lot. Joyce, thank you so much for agreeing to be my guest today.
Thank you for having me. We always have a lot of fun.
We do. So our topic today is help. My feed shelf is overflowing. What can I do? A common sense approach to natural equine nutrition. And I used to see this when I was showing horses for many years. I would see the same thing in the equine world that I have seen so much in the small animal world. People come in and they bring 3 grocery bags full of supplements and things that they're adding to the food bowl, thinking that they are improving the health and nutrition of their pets. Meanwhile, feeding a highly processed food, not applying good nutrition. And so I used to see this in the horse world all the time. You walk into somebody's tech room, because I used to do a lot of chiropractic and acupuncture on horses, in addition to my small animal practice. And I'd walk into their feed room and again, just dozens of containers of supplements. And so often they're duplicating so many things. You turn them around and read the ingredients in them, and it's like, okay, well, there's, flaxseed 27 different ways.
Yep. And that's
so why does equine nutrition seem so complicated? Why does everybody think they need to add all these supplements? And what's wrong with just going to the feed store and grabbing a bag of big name equine feed, and usually sweet feed?
Well, the biggest issue is that, well, there's 2 major issues and a whole bunch of significant issues. The biggest issue is that it is impossible to put everything a horse needs into a bag of food and heavily process it and be healthy on the other side, because we know we really shouldn't be doing things like eating Hostess Twinkies all day long, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? I mean, that's just kind of common sense. But that's basically what is happening with a feed bag. They put all this feed in and put all these ingredients in, and they come up with a formula that says, here's X, Y, and Z vitamin B, or X, Y, and Z carbohydrate or fat or whatever. And they don't necessarily pay attention to the quality of what's gone in there. But even more importantly, if you look at that feed bag, it's going to say, feed 4 pounds to my pleasure horse twice a day. And that is supposed to get you all the nutrients that you need. Well, your pleasure horse probably can't eat 4 pounds unless he's going to weigh 500 pounds more than he should. And so what we have in that bag of food is sort of a false sense of security that's going to provide everything they need and in the quality that they need. Because many of the supplements that are added to a bag of grain, they still go through the processing, and they aren't necessarily as potent or even in the same format as they were when they went in. And, they put probiotics in, and they put omega-3 fatty acids in. And omega-3 fatty acids do not like to be heated. They don't like to be exposed to the air.
Right.
And what are you going to do? You're going to open the feed bag and dump it into your feed bin, and it's going to be exposed to the air, and it was exposed to heat during the processing of the feed anyway. So you actually don't have the best quality nutrients in that. Besides which, they're almost all genetically modified. The corn, the soybean, which makes up 80%, and the beet pulp all make up 80 to 90% of the nutrients. So what we need to do if we want to actually simplify nutrition is to back off from the bag of food and think about, just like you talk about all the time, Dr. Judy, whole foods, simple foods, and using your concentrate to feed whatever amount of calories, essentially, that your horse needs, which for many horses is 2 or 3 handfuls of some kind of very simple, natural concentrate. And then spend your money on your high-quality supplement to add exactly what you need for your horse. And what you find is that lots of times we're just adding all of these massive amounts of supplements to counteract what is happening in the feed bag. So the genetically modified, the lack of nutrients, the lack of quality nutrients, we can put that in a nice, healthy supplement that we give exactly the amount the horse needs, instead of feeding 4 pounds to attempt to give the amount the horse needs.
Well, it's so similar to the processed pet food industry. So, we can start, well, first of all, they don't even start with high quality ingredients. I don't think our horses, given the choice, are going to go out in the soybean field and eat a bunch of soybeans. And I don't think maybe they would go eat a bunch of corn if they were given the choice. But given all these genetically modified ingredients, which we now know are so bad for us, so bad for our pets, so bad for our horses, bad for the planet. But it's sort of the same thing. You take these low quality ingredients, you heat process them, and then you add these synthetic vitamin mineral mixes to try to come close to getting the nutrition that's needed. So I know with AFCO regulates all animal feed. So I'm assuming that and I don't know why I've never even looked at this because I spend so much time playing with AFCO. But the publication that has all the nutrient requirements for dogs and cats also has the nutrient requirements for horse feed, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So basically they're giving us a minimum standard. And so these vitamin mineral supplements are added in the hope that it will supply what the horse needs. But again, if the label says you have to feed 4 pounds of food in order to reach that nutrient level for your, pasture potato horse, they're going to all be so fat and foundered, they're never going to be able to move.
Right. Right. And so we have to look for the whole food based quality types of ingredients so that what we put into our horses actually gets digested, gets assimilated, gets into their system. And what you actually find is you don't need as much in the supplement department when you're actually feeding real food. Just like we don't need nearly as many sort of vitamins and supplements and things to try and keep us healthy if we are eating good whole food. And so
Absolutely.
what you find is that you add and add and add because you're just never quite there. And you look, everybody wants their horse's coat to look shiny. So you get all these coat conditioners, and then you get all these shampoos. And then you look at a horse that's truly healthy standing out in the hot sun with a shiny coat because they're getting the nutrients that they need, and they're getting the quality of whole food that they need.
Exactly. Yeah, it makes a huge difference in the health of the horse in general. And I find that I'm with my equines, particularly later in my career. I have backed off so much on the over vaccination. I've backed off on feeding processed foods, and it's just so interesting that I feel like the pet people are a step ahead of the horse people with the holistic stuff. I feel like we haven't cracked the nut as much with holistic horse care. Do you find that to be true?
I think I would tend to agree with that. Part of it is probably because a lot of people are in a boarding type of situation with the horses, whereas most of our pets are at home. And so we have a lot more control over what is done. And if you are boarding horses, and many, many people board horses, and so you can't necessarily make the kinds of choices that you would make if the horse was in your backyard. So that's a piece of
Very
it.
true.
So you're kind of stuck. And in the nutrition course, I try to go through ways to work around some of the situations you get into in boarding, because you have to. You can only do what you can do. And the reality is that we don't always have control. And because so many of the people are sold on the idea of everything comes in a bag, they're happy to feed all your horse's supplements and often charge you a little extra to add extra supplements to your horse's food. But they don't want to change from the status quo, which is you buy the big name bags of feed and they get delivered on a big truck and you don't really have to think. Though even that's confusing these days, because each company has 25 different possibilities that you can select from. And in that way, their nutritionists can come in and say, well, you need this bag versus that bag versus another bag.
Right.
But they're all internally pretty much the same.
Exactly. We need to take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You're listening to another informative Naturally Healthy Pets podcast episode because you want your pets to live long and healthy lives. Here's an exclusive offer to our horse people who purchase our course, Horse Longevity, 6 Steps to Improve Longevity in Your Horse with Dr. Joyce Harman. Save 15% using the code podcast55 when purchasing on drjudyu.com. We can't forget about our beloved horses. What we feed our equines has a profound impact on their health, well-being, temperament, and performance. The entire Naturally Healthy Pets team highly recommends the extensive 7-hour course, Horse Healthmanship Nutrition 101, with renowned holistic veterinarian Dr. Joyce Harman. Dive into this informational course and give your horse the vibrant life they deserve. Podcast listeners get a 15% discount using code podcast55 at checkout on drjudyu.com.
Welcome back. I'm your host, Dr. Judy Morgan, on Dr. Judy Morgan's Naturally Healthy Pets. My guest today, Dr. Joyce Harman, is I think, an equine guru in holistic equine medicine. And we are discussing equine nutrition and why it seems like it's so complicated. And before the break, we were talking about boarding your horses. So I have a story about that. I was so excited when I finally got my own farm and could bring my horses home. And over a series of events, my horses ended up back in boarding. So I had them at home on my own farms for about 10 years, and then we ended up back in boarding. And the boarding stable that I went to was the same boarding stable that I had boarded my ponies at when I was in high school showing. So here I am as a 50-year-old woman taking my horses back to that same boarding stable. And my friend, we'd been friends for most of my life, ran the barn. And so she was pretty good about, wanting to do things the right way. And so she had the local feed mill actually making her own mix. And it was, whole grains, more whole foods. It wasn't a sweet feed. It was, you could look at it and say, oh, I see oats and I see this and I see this. And it was great. No problems with it. And one day I walked in the feed room and there was a whole big old stack of bags of processed feed. And I went, well, what are we doing here? And I went and read the ingredient label and I tore it off and I took it inside the house at the farm and said, you will not feed this to my horses. I will go buy my own feed. I will pay for it out of my own pocket on top of my board, but this is not good nutrition and this is not what we are going to feed. Well, I must not have been the only one who complained. Of course, I had 7 horses there and I had a big mouth, and I was brave enough to say that to her. But within 3 days, all that food was gone and the other food came back in. And maybe it costs a little bit more. And I was just sort of like, listen, if you have to raise my board by $25 per horse per month in order to get a better food in here, I want the better food. So I think that, the boarding thing is a huge, huge problem. And I want to ask you a question. Dried beet pulp.
Mm-hmm.
Why do people love adding dried beet pulp? And should it be soaked?
Beet pulp should be soaked. You can actually get away with adding some dried beet pulp because of the volume of the horse's digestive tract and moisture that they take in. It will process it and be halfway decent. However, beet pulp is all genetically modified. And so many of our issues, beet pulp, I think, became genetically modified in 2008. And because it's an annual crop that's planted every year, of course, they all jumped on the bandwagon and everything became genetically modified. Around the time that we were also starting to feed a lot of beet pulp because horse owners were waking up to the fact that most horses really don't need grain. And they don't need the corn and oats, but we still want to sell a $30, $40 bag of food to these people so they can feed 4 pounds a day. And so they started using beet pulp as sort of a lower calorie filler, if you will. And beet pulp actually has some really good, it's a short chain fiber. It's good for the microbiome. But as it became all genetically modified, and at the same time, we are dramatically increasing our use of it in horse food. That's around, it's not exactly the time that we started seeing more and more issues, but since then, I think we have seen more and more health issues, metabolic issues, digestive, ulcers, things like that, which we know are all connected to the GMOs. So there's, as far as I know, only one brand that is non-GMO, which is the Speedy Beet. There may be getting to be others, and there may be smaller feed companies now that are making or are having farmers grow non-GMO beets for them. So if you're feeding a natural brand or a brand that's claiming to be non-GMO, there could be beet pulp in there that is non-GMO because you can grow it.
Okay.
Amazingly enough, it does actually grow.
Isn't that funny how we used to grow all kinds of things that were non-GMO and now?
Yeah.
So let's talk more about your two courses. At least the two courses that we have on Dr. Judy U. We have horse longevity and horse healthmanship. What do you talk about in the horse longevity course?
So the horse longevity
What are the
course
most important things?
It's kind of an introduction to looking at your horse holistically. So we talk a little bit about vaccination. We talk a little bit about nutrition. It's a short introduction to my style of teaching. It's a broad but not very deep overview into natural horse care, keeping horses outside, trying to feed whole foods, trying to use whole food supplements. And if you have been in the holistic field, it's probably not a whole lot that's very new. But if you have somebody who might be interested or is thinking about learning more, that's a great introduction to just that broad brush of how do we look at our horse more holistically. The horse
I have to tell you, I mean, I'm a holistic person, and I've been a horse owner for most of my life. And when I watched your horse longevity, which you say is sort of, a broad overview, there were things that I learned in there. And I didn't think that in sort of that very basic course, there would be a whole lot that was new to me. And there was. So, that's why with that one, I'm like, you know what? I think every horse owner should be watching this, because it makes us think differently about things that we just take for granted. I mean, we all just take for granted because our veterinarian says we should vaccinate with 27 different things every spring and every fall. It makes zero sense. And, if somebody told me to do that with my dogs and cats, I'd say, no freaking way, I'm not going to do that. But for so many years, I did that with my horses. And again, if you're boarding, sometimes it's required. And I think that's where we need to stand up. And so basically with my friend, when I was boarding my horses there, I would say, I'll give my own vaccines, thanks. And then just tell her that I did, because there was no way that my horses needed 27 vaccines twice a year. And since we moved to North Carolina, our animals, our horses, they're outside. They have shelter they can go to when they want to, fresh water twice a day, fresh low carb hay, and free roaming on 20 acres. And they don't need all these vaccines. They're healthy. I think that we've especially in the show horse world. Oh my God, I worked at a saddlebred barn in college. It was my summer. I got, I don't know, 7 or 8 college credits for working at this saddlebred farm as my summer internship. And those horses were locked in their stalls 23 and a half hours a day in the dark. They weren't, because when they came out of those stalls, they wanted them to go, ugh, because that's the brio that you look for in a saddlebred. What an unnatural life, not to mention their, feet are this long, stacked up on high shoes, and the tail sets. I learned so much about what not to do with horses that summer.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, this is the kind of stuff that you talk about in horse longevity, like things that should seem like they make good sense. And then we turn right around and lock our horses in a little 10 by 10 box for so much of their life. Not normal.
No, it's not. And part of what happens in that not normal life is that we start to need a whole lot more supplements. So how many supplements do you actually end up needing to feed your horses that are now free roaming or on 20 acres? Not a lot, right?
I have
issues.
Not much at all. The only one on anything is I have a donkey who has insulin resistance, and so she has kind of sore feet, and she came to us from neglect and abuse situation. So she's on the PEA, and she's on an herb for the insulin resistance and a hoof supplement. That's it.
That's all. And there's one of your more complicated cases or animals that are out there. And so you end up, and the way to think about supplementation in sort of 2 sentences is you only add the supplements that you actually need. So here's the donkey that has issues. So you add a few supplements that do the trick. And you don't keep adding. You just pick what that animal needs.
Right.
But not every animal in the field needs that. It's just the more you keep them in confinement, the more you actually require the gut supplement, the behavior supplements, because the behavior is abnormal because they're stuck inside. But you then find yourself adding that, and then you have to add the skin supplements because they aren't rolling in the dirt and being happy. That stress shows up everywhere in the body. So you end up with 25 supplements. But even if you look at that, you realize that you could pare it down to what that animal really needs. And that's kind of what the whole nutrition course is.
Exactly. That's what I want to talk about because we only have a minute or so left. So horse healthmanship, that dives a lot deeper into nutrition.
Yes. So that's in that course. It's a long course, but it's set up in a fun way. You're only allowed to watch 10 minutes a day. It's each module comes up as 7 to 10 minutes because it's a new scientific way of learning, because who's going to learn sitting there listening to 45 minutes of me droning on, right? But you can tolerate me for 7 minutes, and then I'm going to give you an exercise to go do that you actually are going to learn from. And so the course is designed to be fun and educational and help you sort through all the different aspects and figuring out what it is that your horse needs and what they don't need.
Exactly. And that is just critically important information that I think so many of us are lacking. Dr. Joyce, we appreciate you so much. We appreciate the gift that you are to the equine world. I always learn from you when I get to talk to you. And I wish you lots and lots of health and luck on your new adventures that you are undertaking. Thank you so much for being my guest today. And thank you so much for making the horse longevity and horse healthmanship courses. They are amazing. Any equine lover and owner should definitely take these courses, listen to what Joyce has to say, because she's brilliant.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to another great Naturally Healthy Pets episode. Be sure to check out the show notes for some helpful links. And if you enjoy the show, please be sure to follow and listen for free on your favorite podcast app. We value your feedback and would love to hear from you on how we're doing. Visit drjudymorgan.com for healthy product recommendations, comprehensive courses, upcoming events, and other fantastic resources. Until next time, keep giving your pet the vibrant life they deserve.
The purpose of this podcast is to educate and to inform. It is no substitute for professional care by a veterinarian, licensed nutritionist, or other qualified professional. You're encouraged to do your own research and should not rely on this information as professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Dr. Judy and her guests express their own views, experience, and conclusions. Dr. Judy Morgan's Naturally Healthy Pets neither endorses or opposes any particular view discussed here.